Hello.
Hey.
Here we go again. This is Saturday and we are recording the next episode of Biweeklycast, and the host is still the same. It's you.
I'm Slava Rudnitsky and you are...
And I'm Dima Malenko. And today we are going to talk about book, because this is a book club episode.
And I believe that's one of my favorites this year. But by February 3rd,
yeah,
I've read 12 different books.
Wait. Let's pause on that. Like, it's February 3rd. That's roughly 34 days that elapsed this year. How many books have you read again? 47? What?
12.
12.
It's 10 plus 2.
So that's like roughly 3 days per book.
Most of them were in 2 days, and then there were breaks.
Right, we might want to talk about that, how and why and what were the benefits. But maybe we can get to that through this episode, right?
Hopefully not. But before we get to the book that we are going to discuss today, it's Hyperfocus by Chris Bailey. There is a follow-up.
Yeah, like in the last episode, you coined the term that stuck to me for a long time, and I imagine it will be with me for a long time. That digital travel time. I kind of through this week, which was very kind of busy, sort of in a good sense, with a lot of collaboration with different people, and therefore lots of meetings. Yeah, I would have appreciated having digital travel time attached to many of them, to be able to switch the context and shift mental gears. And I'm thinking, how can I do that with my calendar? Like, allow myself a little bit of a digital travel time. Maybe we can talk about if it works or if it doesn't sometime later. But thanks for this idea.
I kind of missed this point at one of my events. I scheduled digital travel time before the event, but didn't schedule after. And now, right after a dance class, I'm supposed to go on a business call. Like the very next minute it ends.
So you can open the meeting like, shall we dance?
Hopefully not. So, back to business or back to books?
Right, the Hyperfocus. I think it was I who brought this book to our attention, and as always, like, origin story of that is kind of murky. I think I was in a situation when there was some sort of sale or something like that. Like, I had particular desire to buy a book on Audible, and I think this Hyperfocus book was one of the either top suggested or like somehow it caught my attention, and I decided to give it a go, even though I think I initially was reluctant about the book, saying like, yet another productivity book, but maybe like let's try.
And I really appreciate that you tried, because I think it was one of the best reads, and it was very, let's say, correspondent to my theme about winter focus. And I think that many of the ideas that I got from Chris, even not his tips, but when he suggested something and I disagreed and I tried something by myself, was still valuable. So just to give it a digital impact, my screen time decreased from 3.5 hours on smartphone in December to 35 minutes on average in January.
Well, that's impressive.
Mostly because of this book, but let's discuss the helicopter view or the overview of the book for people who haven't read it or haven't listened to it.
Right. I think the book is roughly structured into bigger parts, right? And I think given the fact that I'm listening to audiobooks, it is difficult for me to visualize structures of the book sometimes. But I think it is split into two major parts, like part 1 and part 2. One is talking about the hyperfocus, the state or kind of state or mode of operation where one particular single task occupies all of attention. And then it talks about scatter focus, where this is a kind of opposite of hyperfocus, right? When you try to scatter your attention to find patterns and connect the dots which might not be kind of visible or obvious in other modes.
You basically let your mind go, and you might be still thinking about something, but not intentionally or trying to focus on it, but rather just keeping it on the background.
Mm-hmm.
You might be reading a book about marketing while thinking about an idea that you have to do. And that was actually one of my 12 books. Actually, 9 of my 12 books were about marketing. And I was thinking about BizDev team in Savvy. And while reading those books, I was thinking what I can do about it in my team.
Cool. Is it, and he also gives a whole bunch of different tips or tactical suggestions about how to, like, what does it mean to hyperfocus, how to hopefully enter this mode of operation, and what are the pitfalls and how to guard against them, something like that.
So let's say that if I just don't look at notes or my thoughts or something, the first thing that comes to my mind when I remember about this book is that Chris, just like us, likes classifications and definitions. And that was nice to start with coining the terms, explaining what they mean, giving some sort of gradations. And that was about the tasks, types of work, when he described that there is necessary work, purposeful work, and there was a grid of 4 that looked a lot like the Eisenhower's metrics, but I think it made a bit more sense to me than Eisenhower, and it's used in different contexts, so we don't even have to compare them. And then a micro tip about the phone that actually changed my perception of this gadget. That basically it's a mini computer that you need when you get out of the apartment, mostly, and you don't have to carry it with you all the time. So that was the habit I changed. Like, I don't carry it on the pocket anymore. It's sitting on the desk and charging most of the time, unless I'm traveling somewhere and I'm using it as a navigator or podcast or something along those lines. But even in that case, I use these focus modes that still minimize the number of distractions and notifications I get. And these two things were like really interesting. So the classification of tasks and distractions, and the approach to reconsider your phone use.
Interesting. Yeah, I also appreciated the kind of structure of how Chris kind of laid out ideas, because I think it kind of fits the like Minto pyramid, right? When he first introduces the big idea, the cornerstone of the soul, and then provides more details and more ideas or tips to support that. I think that was appealing to me and made this book easier to, well, at least some parts of it easier to understand and read. It's interesting that suggestions that he provided. I'm not sure about you, but for me it was a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them like really resonated, but some of them were like, yes, maybe, but I felt like the suggestion, like he has a lot of focus. Has a lot of focus on email throughout the book, as email is a distraction, and I like, no, well, at least for me, and I would think that for a lot of other people in occupation like mine, email would probably not be the main source of distraction. It would be like chat or interruptions from co-workers, and I found it a bit unfortunate that Chris talked about this part but completely omitted that other part, which I think may have somewhat different dynamics and may appreciate from some additional intentional thinking about that aspect.
I can think of only of one excuse, that the book was initially published in 2016, which was probably meant that it was written 7-ish years ago, and the dynamics could be slightly different there.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, Chris was mostly writing from his background, and he's a freelancer, so
Right.
I believe that might be his main inbox and the way he gets information from the world.
Right. And then it may be that he doesn't really have co-workers or like teammates to work together, which can also be source of welcome or unwelcome distractions.
But I think that most of the tips he mentioned there are kind of workable with chats. You might mute, you can set the notifications in different ways, and it's just different tool set, but the principle that he explains can be managed, that you spare some time for this communication, that you highlight the important channels only and mute everything else. But it was kind of obvious, and this part was not really engaging for me. So I noticed that in your notes you wanted to compare it with deep work.
Yeah, I thought that we might.
I know, I don't see the connection pretty much at all. So could you tell me why you think so?
Wouldn't the connection be that both books are about kind of being productive, so that connects them, and increasing,
and pretty much any other personal productivity,
right?
There.
Yes. So that brings them into the same ballpark. But also the idea, I think, in deep work, the Cal Newport, the author of that book, also pays a lot of attention to distraction and managing distraction, which to me doesn't sound too dissimilar to the idea of hyperfocus.
I think they're totally opposite here. And not because of the idea of hyperfocus and deep work, but because Cal Newport was such an advocate of deep work that the connotation of shallow work that he gives in his book is pretty much negative. Like, whenever you do shallow work, you basically waste your productivity or diminish your ability to focus, etc.
Right.
While Chris Bailey in Hyperfocus says that scatter focus is actually useful and you need it, and you have to intentionally choose when you go there, and you have to spend a reasonable amount of time there. You can't hyperfocus all the time. And that seems much more realistic to me, because deep work is like a fantasy or the advocacy of one state of mind that you can't stay in forever. But while reading Cal's book, it seems like the longer you can stay there, the more productive you are, which is not really like corresponding to my experience.
Interesting. Well, because I kind of share this sentiment, even though it seems to me that from the outsider's view, book may seem related or maybe even be about the same topic. I think that they are different, and the way I see them different would be what I will try to describe now. But before that, I think I'd rather take a bit of a step back, and we talk about the key thing that kind of I think I got from this book, like the key idea which I liked very, very much, and that idea was the idea of kind of fixed attention span, not span, like attention space. Chris calls it attention space. So he says, he poses the idea that we have this fixed amount or fixed size attention space, and it remains unchanged regardless of what we are doing. It is how we use that space that defines whether we are productive or not productive, and what are the types of activities that we can successfully accomplish with particular set of or configuration of how we use this attention space. I think to me that was similar to the idea, and those of you who studied physics, and you did study physics, right, as well, like to the idea of energy, right? Like when we start first learning physics, we speed, like forces and stuff like that, and sometimes it makes very tricky to solve particular like physical problems when with those notions. But then as soon as you learn about the energy and the law of preservation of energy, it makes a lot of things a lot simpler and more straightforward. And that idea of attentional space played the same role for me here. Like, oh, this is the energy, that this is the amount that remains unchanged from situation to situation, and let's see how it changes its configuration with the relation to that stuff. And that, I guess, brings me to how I think this book is different from deep work, because and I think I've heard that in what you were saying, that what Cal describes is mostly kind of extrinsic. It focuses on the extrinsic part of stuff. Like you want to block distractions, you like and stuff like that. Like the external kind of external factors or descriptions of how you work. Whereas this book, with this idea of attentional space, I think it starts with inner situations and inner concerns, and then translates them into like behaviors and things that would be seen from outside.
I would also add to this that probably Chris Bailey made more, did a better research. I think that the number of things that he referred to was not a personal methodology that someone can use for oneself, but more like highlights. I can give an example of his vision of multitasking.
Right.
Like he was not just explaining how he believes multitasking works, but it was this idea of attention space, and that you can fit there just that many tasks, and some of them are habitual, some of them are routine, some of them are intention heavy and attention heavy, and you can combine many of those. And if you switch, and like this is not Chris's idea there. While reading Cal Newport's deep work, I remember that it was mostly understanding like the way he manages his work and the way he believes things work. There was not much reference to any science or research or anything outside of deep work. I may be wrong. It was quite a while ago when I read deep work, so not sure about that.
I think I have similar remembrances about the deep work. That is, it was heavily on kind of reporting personal experiences, which is not bad, right? We were not saying it's bad by any stretch of imagination, but that I guess that also makes this book a bit different. Although Chris quite often made references to how he used these methods to writing this very book, which were interesting, I guess. But here about his references to research and that kind of stuff, I think for me it played a bit of a like two conflicting roles. On one hand, yeah, it was good to know that at least some of this is somewhat supported by quote unquote research, but sometimes I felt that maybe it's too much of a stretch to say that this idea is supported by this research, or the research is kind of conclusive or suggestive. When it says that the things that I believe to be, I don't remember specific examples, but something like the productivity or something like that increased by 19%. Yes, maybe, but like my own productivity without those methods from day to day can change by more than 19%. Like how meaningful are those numbers? And I felt that at times maybe leaning on them too much as a kind of primary points to support his ideas.
Let me put it this way. The phrasing, the wording, the explanation, the examples may be poor at different levels, but if I were to write a book,
Mm-hmm.
I would probably pick the same way. Like I
Mhm.
would dig into ResearchGate and find scientific papers
Mhm.
about the topic. I would map them out, so I would have lots of data points, and then I would arrange them somehow. That's what Chris basically did with this hyperfocus and deep focus sections in the book. And then I would think where I can share my experiences, where I can share some tips from researchers, where I can share some stories to make it diverse. I agree that it might be not always the optimal balance of personal experience, conclusions that people run, or just the way he makes references, not very scientific. He says like, well, there was a research that showed that meditation helps. Like, cool. How was this research run? But then it turns into a scientific paper. So what would be enough for me? By the way, it's not actually a point in the ebook. There are no links to the research and names and references, unfortunately. And you can't really check that out. But still, it makes an impression of something well thought. And I can see that there were some sections which were really thought-provoking. For example, a question that Chris asked himself and then the readers, when was your last super productive day? It made me think, actually, for quite a while. So, Dima, when was your last super productive day?
I would struggle to pinpoint the precisely day, but I'm really convinced that it was within last 3 weeks for sure.
Could you describe it?
I think that probably was a day when I was working on one of the proposals for a project or for a bigger initiative where I like entered sort of a hyper-focus mode, and I focused on this particular document or and nailing one particular idea or message I wanted to deliver with that. And
so
well,
did you spend most of your day working on it, or
that was what I wanted to go into next. When I say it probably not probably definitely it was not the whole day. Maybe it were like 3 to 4 hours, I think. But I would call it a super productive day. I don't know. Maybe your mileage would be different. But I would call this as a super productive day. But this was not a whole day. But this one gem of productivity, I think, made it for me on that one. And what about you?
That's what I've noticed about you after all these years of recording, that you actually enjoy when you manage to hyperfocus. Like, and I believe that was one of the reasons why you actually enjoyed solving engineering problems at some points back in roll-up times. Yeah, when you would dig into some technical details or solutions or something, even knowing that you have a lot of managerial tasks to do, but coding and solving some issues was a way to hyperfocus, and it's much harder for a manager to find this time, to find the problem, and to be able to focus, especially considering the amount of communication that happens around.
Right. Well, I guess, yeah, that rings the bell for me. I think what makes... let's put it this way, where I could do better with this like hyper-focusing kind of thing is I noticed that there are certain types of problems or questions that are more likely to trigger this hyper-focus kind of mode of operation for me. And when it triggers, I do enjoy the process. However, and I think Chris also alluded to this, that his book is also about being intentional about hyperfocus and like training an ability to enter hyperfocus when you need it for the task you have at hand. And this is, I'm definitely not there yet. If I would know that something is important, but it's not from the category of tasks that easily get me going, I would struggle to enter the hyperfocus mode, and I guess some of the suggestions from the book would be helpful.
You know, that's one of the things I enjoyed about hyperfocus, that it's not just a set of some practical tips and hacks how to arrange your day, but there is some philosophy behind it. The idea of purposeful work basically triggers the necessity of setting priorities. You would have to understand what really matters. And this is what day-to-day managers don't often think about. Like, they probably should, but the way I see it, that doesn't happen very much. There are some settled priorities or something that was discussed 6 months ago, and we keep digging in that direction without reconsidering or thinking what is actually important for me. And then when things change, when the status quo changes, and there is no mechanism how to reevaluate or reset what actually matters. And some work that was meaningful 2 months ago stops being meaningful, but you do it because it's in your calendar, and your productivity and KPIs and stuff are kind of linked to the results of this work, but not of something that actually matters now, but was not formally recognized yet. And you focus on work that becomes necessary. And it's the same work that was purposeful 2 months ago. So these things may change very, very much. And the other, I think, very important point was the example about the intentions. In his book, Chris describes the way that we quite often make very vague wording on intentions. Like, I would like to eat better, or sleep more, how much more. And I believe that when you shape an intention, it becomes more meaningful when you know what it means. Not just do sports, but in your case, what was that workout application?
7-minute workout.
7-minute workout. Like, instead of saying, like, I would like to work out, I would like to use this app with a 15-minute session, at least 3 times a week. And I think it works much better in terms of task setting and then checking the results and then seeing the progress and tracking everything and making meaning of it afterwards.
Yep, I agree. I think I would want to dive maybe like on 2 points in what we just discussed, and then obviously ask you about your most productive day in recent times. I think, that idea about being specific with your intentions, I think, is very powerful. Also, I would think that it's rather common for in time management literature, right? I think also in GTD, it was also about that, like, be specific about the next step that you're going to take, and indeed it helps to be like, when you want to, I don't know, to do a dental checkup, like, first, like, figure out where you would want to go. Like, maybe you want also, like, check up your insurance conditions and stuff like that. Like, being specific will get you much further. And I also feel like this with projects, it also works the same way. Being vague about the great grand idea and bright future only gets you as far. Like, you really start going when you start taking small but specific steps towards in that direction. And there, I think it is also important not just to. I think I myself fallen for the trap where I would have this, like, do some, like, eat better. Like, if you take this as an example, then I would put a very specific item, like, buy avocados, and then it would be like, buy avocados, ? Profit, eat better. It's like working out a bit more detail would help, like, beyond the first step to keep the momentum going. I think that would be helpful as well. And one other thing, and I would probably suggest this to be a broader discussion maybe in one of our episodes, that idea, when it is time to switch gears or change horses, when we made a decision, like, some time ago, how do we know that it's time to change, or how we organize the process such that we do not kind of wobble too much by making a decision and then immediately afterwards question it and try to renegotiate or relitigate already made decision. And on the other hand, avoid being stuck with things of the past which are no longer valid or relevant or hold true. Let's hold this thought.
I think our listeners might be confused according to one section here. When we speak about themes, we actually enjoy that they're vague and there's nothing specific there. And now here we are talking that intentions should be very specific and clear. And I think we should bring some clarity.
Yeah, let's try.
When we discuss the vectors, the ideas of self-development or some ideas about improvement, this vagueness helps because you don't know what you would like to do better. Like the year of health as a theme is pretty vague, but the action points, like the key results that you plan every day, should be specific. You don't know what they are in 2 months, but you know what they are in a week. Like the closer the time spent, the more specifics you can get. And there is no need to be very, let's say, demanding, or having high hopes or expectations that you will always meet all the intentions and you will always fulfill all your plans. That's not the purpose of theme or not the purpose of planning itself. You might be wrong, and that's okay. The question is if you understand where it went wrong. And let me give an example here. I'm having a year of health, and I'm taking a week of no sugar. And it turns out that sugar is a very important stress relieving factor for me. And something happens from the external factors. I don't know, a missile attack on the city. And I can break the no sugar week and have a cake to diminish the amount of stress, not to get depressed, because curing the depression will be much more expensive and will take longer than losing half a kilo, or I'm not sure what the British equivalent of this weight is.
4 pounds.
Well, whatever. And reprioritizing on the fly can be helpful and actually gives you a lot of freedom here, rather than having a plan and then failing the plan. I think one of my favorite illustrators of this are the step trackers, these bracelets that track how many steps you made. I was a big fan of their tracking system when you set the goal and you fulfill the goal, and then it says, yay, and then it gives you the streak of 10 days, 200 days, 400 days. And then I remember one day my tracker just got discharged. Like the battery went low and it didn't track it. And the next day, that day I fulfilled my goal as well. I walked enough, but it just was dead. It couldn't track it. So the next day I wake up, I fulfill my step and goal, and guess what? It says, well, you fulfilled your goal for 1 day. Before that, your streak was 435 days. And for the next 2 months, I was so frustrated with this technology that I actually enjoyed walking. Like I've been walking for a year and more, and it was fun. And this was the moment when probably I should give up this like very strict expectation that I should be keeping this streak, because the streak was still on. Just the technology was not letting me do it. But I remember my frustration about it. I almost gave up walking because of this, and that's where it gets a bit unhealthy, I think. And I got really worried about my reaction to this situation.
Yeah, I totally see that. Then I think I had a similar situation where in my running tracking app, when I run several times a week, and it counts in weeks, like the weeks you had runs, and then in December, there was one particular week when it snowed on the weekend, and it was like almost freezing cold or mostly below zero for the entire week. So the snow and the melted snow and ice accumulated all over, and I thought that it would not be like really safe for me to run in these conditions, because I didn't have any special gear or like shoes for that kind of weather. So I didn't run for that week. I lost my streak there as well, and I also felt, oh yeah, that's a shame. But then I also thought, like you thought, oh, maybe I should not just don't pay attention to this, like focus on what's here and now. And two thoughts, two points from me. First would be real-time follow-up. When you say losing half a kilo, and I said in British things it would be 4 pounds, I think I was grossly mistaken. Like half a kilo would be around 1 pound. I don't know, like somehow I was thinking about 2 kilos. 2 kilos would be 4 pounds. And on the themes, and I think what makes themes work as a wake thing is that the way we practice them, and the way they are intended to be practiced, is that this wake theme comes with time to work out the vagueness, right? We say that if you're working on the theme, you kind of think about your day, you reflect, you plan the next steps and stuff like that. So you couple vagueness with the time to work out that vagueness for the particular situation, and that's what makes it work. And in some other situations with more specific tasks or achievements, we might not allow ourselves that time to work out vagueness, and being specific would help to make progress and gain some momentum.
I've actually noticed this in terms of intentions in goal setting in our team. I've just realized that some projects that are easy and clear, whenever we do the strategic session, I can write a key result. Mm-hmm. I can make a checklist. I can set the deadlines. I can even estimate the budget and when it's going to end. For some bigger things, something that takes a year plus, mm-hmm. I can probably think of first 3 steps. And then I don't really know what's going to happen. I just know the final outcome that I would like to get. But I can't always tell you the way I will get there. Whether I'm going to expand the team, reskill my team, change the approach, outsource something. Like, you don't really know before you dig into it. And sometimes you don't actually have to. But having these first steps is what helps you start moving. And that's what Chris was mentioning here, that it's not about being a prophet and knowing what you're going to do for the next year or something, but it's just being more specific about the next steps. Mm-hmm. You know, the way you feel today, the weekend is ahead. So you could, it's simply a bit narrator, yeah, like the weekend is ahead, and you can decide what you would like to do intentionally. Like, would you like to have a cheat meal, or you would like to eat healthy during the weekend because you feel energized and your will is as strong as it could ever be, and you can definitely manage your habits and some desires and dark needs of sugar or something along those lines.
Yeah, or you can check the weather and see that it's for a change, it's not going to be raining and super windy, and maybe you want to enjoy a cup of coffee in a street cafe and sit and chill out and stuff like that. But you need to think about this and be intentional about how you want to go about the weekend.
So to sum up, when you think about longer perspective, having a vague vector is fine, and having intention that is not super crystal clear is also fine, as long as it energizes you. If you feel energy and passion about something, art, work, productivity, relationship, health, sports, whatever, doesn't really matter. It could be even pretty vague. Like, what was the vaguest theme you've had?
I
remember there was one where you were figuring it out in the process so long that, like, for
liberation,
3 months you couldn't
really. Maybe that's the vaguest one. It's the nicest sounding one, but the vaguest one. I think it was Year of Liberation.
In my case, it was the 3-year theme about boldness and being brave. That was something that I never really figured out, and I didn't have the final destination point. Something's happened. I'm not sure why or how, and it was more like magic or shamanism rather than actual work.
Makes sense. And I think that there is a concept which I think is super relevant to what we are discussing now. It comes from software project management. I'm not sure how known or like accepted it is in other areas of life, and it's called cone of uncertainty. I think it stems from the when you try to estimate, like specifically estimate a project, but I guess for estimating something, you need to have more or less precise plan, right? The idea of cone of uncertainty is that whatever happens very close to the present moment, you can figure out what that's gonna be with high certainty, right? You would not it is much easier to estimate what you can do in 1 week, because you would know like specific tasks at hand and how much time is available and so on and so forth. You can be very certain about what you can do in 1 week. But then as you start looking further out, the certainty with which you can predict and therefore estimate and plan what's going to happen or what can be done is going to go smaller and smaller, and at some point your confidence would be just like almost zero, and it would be no better than a guess. And I think it's very, very helpful in planning as well. You want to be very specific about the next steps, like the next period of planning, but then saying that, hey, we are going to have a review for this thing in half a year at 6:30. Yeah, maybe that's too specific for that far out.
I really enjoyed the video of CGP Grey about the fog of the future. I think it was about the pandemic, and I think it kind of described a similar concept.
Yep, same thing. But cone of uncertainty comes with beautiful graphs, so it you can say it's backed by research rather than by a random YouTube video.
It's backed by designers.
Yeah, so true. All right, so that brings us back to a topic: when and what was your most super mega productive day?
You know, when I thought about it, I was really surprised that it was not a Hyperfocus day. It was a Scatterfocus day. I had it about 2 weeks ago. I guess it was Tuesday. And I had a single call on my schedule, and a few tasks in my to-do list, but they were not major tasks, not something like super deep or super important. I was mostly going through some chats and checking stuff, and it was time to get my thoughts in order. And somehow I got the inspiration and energy to text one of our potential partners. It's a popular Ukrainian business school, and offer them a collaboration. And they agreed to discuss it. So we had a call immediately after I texted, discussed the concept and the details. They got interested, and I think it moved both my company and the entire L&D community towards a very good result, just because I got this inspiration and a moment of bravery to text people I don't know.
Awesome. Oh, that's fascinating.
You know, it's like 1 p.m. I've done it, and it feels like, okay, I deserve some time off now.
So like that, yeah,
I can just turn off my laptop and I'm fine today.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, there can be moments where you, like, something happens, like you do something, and then you feel like, oh, like, even if I don't work for the entire week, this would be a huge success already, or something. Well, that's interesting. I have two points. One would be question. Never mind. Like the scatter focus. We mostly were talking about hyperfocus thus far. Let's talk about scatter focus. So I think we already offered a definition for that, right? This is a mode where you intentionally let your mind wander and like jump from idea to idea, from point to point, to hopefully find some interesting connections. How does that work for you? Do you like often enter the scatter focus mode? Like what like did you know about this concept or idea before the book?
I didn't know about this concept, but I was using a synonym. It was named the default thinking system. The default thinking mode is when you let your mind go and see what it wants to think about. And the best example is the massage session. Like I go for 90 minutes and I just have to wait and do nothing there. And I don't really think intentionally about something. Like I don't go like, during the massage, I should think about X. And every week it's something new. I think like yesterday, I was thinking about our Aspen reunion with our group. And for about 90 minutes, I thought about different scenarios and ways to approach it. And it was not intentional. Like I was not pushing myself to think about it. I was just motivated to think about it. A few weeks before, during the 90 minutes, I was thinking about some work-related issues. sometime before that it was personal, and it's always different. So basically, if you just sit, would it be on the chair or at or in, or let's say on?
Yeah, I think it's both. Both variants are possible.
And you don't occupy your mind with pretty much anything, and check what your mind would like to think about, whether it's work-related or personal or just some inspiring ideas or something scary and something frustrating or some fears that you have. I think the concept here is very similar to free writing. Whenever you write these pages and you just let your mind write whatever it wants, there is no question, there is nothing to be answered. You just start writing whatever comes to your mind. And this default thinking system and scatter focus seem pretty similar. The only difference I can feel here is that with scatter focus, you sometimes can give the context to this wandering. Like, for example, I can read a marketing book without a specific request, but still, it will probably inspire some thoughts about marketing, but I'm not sure which ones, because I don't even have a clear problem that I want to solve. But I would like to think about it more, and that gives me the context and the ideas and some inspiration.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And as you said, that in some contexts, I think this idea of scatter focus, that seemingly non-productive time, can have a bit of stigma to it, like you mentioned in deep work. Cal calls it like shallow focus, or maybe like in other contexts people may call this like unintentional time. You are not in control of your mind, and you're not directing it to work on the thing that you want to work. And I think when I was going through reading or listening to the book, I found it a bit relieving that, hey, well, yes, if you call this mode like some fancy word like scatter focus, it kind of legitimizes this kind of activity. Because I found myself, and still to this day, I found myself in situations where like I just cannot switch to something else. Like I know that I want to like start working on something else, but I just cannot make myself do that. And at that times I figured like there is no better way than going for a walk or doing some sort of mindless activity to let the mind like calm down, like spin out some of the things, maybe take some additional notes that come out of that. And when that happened, it makes me more inclined and more positioned for the next thing, for more focused work. So I appreciated Chris's idea to introduce this term scatter focus, because now I can say, like, when I'm doing something like that, stop right there. This science-backed scatter focus mode. So like, leave me alone. I'm being productive here.
You know, and I think it also works in terms of preparation for some creative work.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when I have to write a paper or an article or something complicated, if I spend a few hours before that just walking or not really being hyper-focusing on something, it gives me the preparation that I need. So by the moment I come to the laptop, I will probably know the first steps, or at least the gist of what I would like to do. As an example, we were writing papers during the CELTA certification at British Council. It's a teaching certificate, and we had to do some kind of studies there.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between me and my partner, Alexei Kovalenko, that he would wake up in the morning, have breakfast, open the laptop, and start writing. And then for the second half of the day, he would organize his thoughts, like
mm-hmm.
cut it, edit it, structure it somehow. And in the evening, he would have a really nice study, like 6 pages with some outcomes and stuff. In my case, I can never do that. I cannot just do it on the fly. I would wake up, have breakfast, and go to the lake. And it looks nice, but while walking to the lake, I was considering the way to approach it. What are the issues? What would be the structure? So by the time I would come back during the lunch, and after lunch, I would already have the structure in my mind. But it was the way I would think about it was very different from Alexei's.
Right, I'm very similar to you when I have to work on the documents and presentations. And until I get more or less a complete idea or narrative for this, it's very difficult for me to sit down and start writing. And even if I force myself to start putting the structure and bits and pieces here, it doesn't work as well. So we are similar in that regard. But as you pointed out, that the mileage may vary for different people. We are all built differently. We all operate differently and then more effectively in different modes. And I think with this book and with other things like productivity tips, it is really important to try stuff out and then adjust for your particular circumstances, because some of the things may work, some of the things that didn't work for Chris, probably he would not mention things that didn't work for him, but there would be things that would work for you but would not work for someone else. And it's important for each of us to find our own way of going about this. And like, if I may, like one more thing about scatter focus, I think I found a method of entering that scatter focus for me, and which works quite well. I found, like, even before reading this book, I found that when I'm doing longer time physical activity, like running, or like when back in Dnipro, we used to go to ice rink every Sunday. My daughter would have a like figure skating training, and I will just run circles around the skating rings. And I found that I got a lot of seemingly insightful ideas when I do that. And even nowadays, I really enjoy going for runs, not only for like maintaining physical health and stuff, but I also enjoy the process when I would start with some sort of podcast or audiobook, but very, very often, very soon after that, I will start getting the ideas and stop paying attention to the book. So I'll use this as a kind of jump starter for this scatter focus, and turn off and then continue running and get some ideas that were really helpful for me in the long run. So, yeah.
I could never do that, and I've always been impressed by people like you. My friend Lena is one of the examples. Like, she runs miles and miles and miles and comes with hundreds of thoughts and ideas. When I run, I run. Like, there is not much. I even don't really listen to podcasts. I can listen only to music or something super light, super like, I don't know why, but it just doesn't work that way. For walks, it works perfectly fine. For runs, I just can't. And the same, it doesn't work for driving. It doesn't work for riding a motorcycle. Like, I can't scatter focus in this. I'm probably more present, or this process takes up too much of my attention space.
And I also found that it also kind of depends on the state of mind or my mood or something like that, because sometimes I'm very enthusiastic. Yeah, I'm going for a run, I'll start this audiobook, but sometimes I know, like, I want to go for a run, but I cannot decide what I want to listen to, because I think, listening to business, let's say podcast or book, would be too heavy. I'm not like, I'm not prepared for this right now. And yeah, it definitely works in different ways, but I get it. That's for some people that may not work this way. And I'm with you on driving. I cannot really multifocus no, multitask that much to have like very productive scatter focus type of a situation.
I think we should probably add a disclaimer here that Chris Bailey wrote another book. And he got a panic attack during one of the public speaking events. And the idea that a person who writes about productivity gets oneself into the burnout state and then gets a panic attack is kind of scary, because when you think like, all right, this guy is kind of the role model in terms of productivity, and he knows a lot about focus, and he still got himself into the condition or state where he has to reconsider his attitude to work, about emotions. I think is kind of disturbing, but as I'm in the middle of his last book right now. It's How to Calm Your Mind. I think it's also quite a good read. So maybe one of the future book clubs, maybe about it. We'll see. But I think that what we should keep in mind, that all this productivity advice, hyperfocus, is meant to make you happier about the way you live your life. And if it's not what you need right now, but you actually dream about drawing or spending more time with your family or doing some other stuff, you can read this book with the perspective or the lens of this. Like, how can you be hyper-focus on the relationship? How can you hyper-focus on your friends or on your art or something else? It doesn't have to be work. And I think that's what Chris kind of forgot and got himself into this state. And that was a reminder for myself that productivity sounds fun. There is a lot of stuff happening around and a lot of people encouraging you to try. But you are in control and you are to choose. So that was a reminder from myself as well, that the way I arrange my life is my responsibility. And most of these things should be helpful. If they're not, then just screw them and do what helps.
Yep, certainly. 100% on that. Like, the productivity is a means to an end, not an end in itself. It has to be working and it has to be helpful. If it isn't, then I guess all of us need to reconsider and look for something else or something different.
But some things are just routines, like recording biweekly, and the next episode is routinely going to be a guest episode, which we will not spoil today, but you'll see in a few weeks.
Yep. Stay in touch, keep up with the announcements for who's going to be the mysterious guest in the next episode. And until then, have a good week.
Yeah, good weeks.